When Putin launched the Ukraine invasion, he thought it would be over in weeks, if not days. Glory would come to him, the start of a new Russian empire, with Putin at the helm, securing his legacy as he went. None of that happened. Now, Putin faces the clear fact that he will be dead before the war he started ends. But it won't be Ukraine that kills him. Everybody from Russia's elite to its military bloggers and right up to the inner circle Putin trusts the most are turning on their leader. The sharks are circling, and there is nothing that Putin can do about it. Even mathematically speaking, Putin's war will rage on for literal decades after he is gone. It's not even a question of being ousted from power. Right now, Russia controls 20% of Ukraine, which means it has a little over 482,000 square kilometers to go. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russia has managed to capture just 348.3 square kilometers of Ukraine during the first 4 months of 2026, and that includes a net loss of territory it experienced in April. Multiply that by 3, and you get an advance that amounts to just 1,044.9 square kilometers. Divide the amount of Ukraine left to capture by that number, and you get 461 years. Putin could live 4 entire lifetimes on top of what he has now, and he would still be long dead before Ukraine falls at Russia's current rate of advance. But as bad as the math is for Putin, it isn't the reason why he'll be dead in the water long before Ukraine falls. The reality Putin now faces is that there is far more danger from within than there is in Ukraine. At least with Ukraine, Putin can send soldiers to die and not have to worry about the knives being sharpened in the shadows at home. Time isn't what Putin has to worry about. It's everything else, starting with the very organization that Putin has been using to keep himself in control, Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB. On the surface, it seems like the FSB has been acting in Putin's best interests since he launched his Ukraine invasion. This is Russia's elite security service. It's filled with the types of operatives that Putin will be familiar with from his days in the Soviet Union's old KGB. Like Putin, the FSB is concerned more about control, power, and both the management and access to resources that Putin values most, kindred spirits, in a sense. But that's where Putin's problems begin. If he has found kindred spirits in the FSB, that means he has found others who will do whatever they can to get their hands on power. Putin holds the power. The FSB, which is supposed to help him keep it, is actually slowly wresting power away from him. Again, none of this is evident with just a quick glance at what the FSB has been doing for Putin. When Russia's president ordered internet crackdowns, it was the FSB that executed. Every time that Putin needed a supposedly corrupt official arrested or pushed out of a window, there was the FSB worming its way into his trust by doing whatever he asked. What Putin never realized, and perhaps still doesn't, is that this was all about creating dependence. Putin needs the FSB to the point where it's no longer the president of Russia who truly controls Russia. It's the FSB. Where is the evidence for this? None of it is ever stated outright. That's just not how the FSB works. But the signs are there, and though subtle, they form a tapestry of treachery that has ensnared Putin. An early red flag that the FSB wasn't exactly working in Putin's best interests came when it was tasked with helping Russia to prepare for the Ukraine invasion. Just a few months into that invasion, iStories was reporting that FSB officers were feeding Putin false information about what was happening in Ukraine. This was put down to incompetence at first. However, what this may have actually been was the FSB leading Putin down the path of getting Russia embroiled in a long and painful war that would gradually hack away at the authoritarian leader who has held a grip over Russia for a quarter of a century. Fast forward to now, and the FSB is only building more strength and influence inside Russia, with the irony being that it is using Putin every step of the way. Putin has been expanding the FSB's powers throughout the Ukraine war. As his internal popularity dwindles, the FSB's power grows further. Russia's security service has become institutionalized in Russian politics to the point where not even Putin can make moves against it. How could he? Putin has used the FSB to control Russia's elites and its general population. He expanded the FSB's powers 5 times during the first 4 months of 2026 alone, the Jamestown Foundation reports. Now, the FSB regulates contact between Russia's scholars. It can block access to the internet for anybody at any time and build its own detention centers. The FSB even controls access to Russia's digital channels, both now and in terms of who can use them in the future. Putin said yes to all of this because of how much he fears his own people. The FSB has given Putin the rod that he is using for his own back, and the control is deepening as Putin's fears grow. And if it's not the FSB that is controlling Putin, it's the FSO. Russia's Federal Protective Service may also have a hand in Russia's internet crackdowns, Important Stories reports. As rumblings of coup attempts creep into Putin's ears, the FSO is strengthening security measures by reducing the list of locations Putin visits and conducting in-depth screenings of anybody who visits Putin. The FSO also now controls any and all media involving Putin that is put out to the public. Like the FSB, the FSO is an offshoot of the KGB that Putin so loves, and both are now dangerous to Putin. The FSB is more powerful than it has ever been. The FSO controls access to Putin as well as his location. Putin may not see it, but all of the ingredients of a coup attempt are being put into place. Only it's the organizations that are supposed to be protecting him that are moving all of the pieces. Putin handed control over to these organizations. They are now using it to ensure that their leader descends even deeper into the pit of paranoia that will ultimately be his undoing. Putin's own fear is being used to make him bend under the pressure exerted by these organizations, and we can see a perfect example from what happened in Iran. When mass protests broke out in Iran toward the end of 2025 and into 2026, Iran responded by cracking down on communications. An internet shutdown was put in place as Iran's regime attempted to exert control by forcing the country's people into a state of digital isolation. That played right into the FSB's hands. It could point to what was happening to Iran and tell Putin, "Look, we don't want what is happening in Iran to happen to you. Let's get ahead of it. Give us the power to crack down on internet usage, and we'll be able to stop Russia's people from organizing." And wouldn't you know it, the FSB was already set to gain the power to fully cut internet and phone networks in Russia by the beginning of February, just weeks after Iran's protests exploded. This is the sort of maneuvering that not even Putin sees, and it has put him into a catch-22 situation. Putin has given up so much of his control that he is slowly becoming little more than a figurehead. Sure, his voice still carries weight among Russia's population, but the real power players are the organizations that have managed to build themselves up on the back of Putin's paranoia. Remember that Putin is a man who is desperate to hold on to power. It was only in September that a hot mic caught Putin and China's president, Xi Jinping, talking about using organ transplants to keep themselves alive until they're 150 years old. Again, it's all ammunition that Russia's security service organizations can use to play Putin. You want to live to 150? Well, you'll need protection to make that happen, so pass more laws that allow us to do what we want. These organizations know that Putin is never going to step down willingly. So what they're doing is preparing for the day that Putin's delusions catch up to him. Which of those delusions is the question? If it's the one where Putin thinks he's going to live to 150, then it's just about waiting and manipulating. Let Putin hand over more and more power until he inevitably croaks long before that, and then the FSB and FSO will be the kingmakers in Russia. Or the FSB can use Putin's paranoia to control him as the fires of rebellion are being stoked elsewhere in Russia. After all, plenty is happening inside Russia right now that the FSB can use to fuel Putin's fear. It's not just the subtle maneuvering of his inner circle that is going to get rid of Putin. That maneuvering is being accompanied by some of Russia's most important voices turning against their president. But before we dive deeper into that, we are the military show, and we bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. Hit subscribe if you want to see more about how power really moves. Fear is an interesting tool. For most of his reign, Putin has been able to wield it effectively to maintain his control over Russia. He's also been economical in his use of fear. As brutal as Putin's dictatorship has been, he hasn't implemented the types of brutal purges that we saw under old Soviet leaders, such as Joseph Stalin. Putin has always been more precise than that. He removed enemies by arresting them, blocking their access to media, or removing them via assassinations that didn't require the sort of bloodshed that Russia has seen in the past. Still, the message was the same as that delivered by Russian leaders gone by. Fear Putin, don't do anything political, or you will be next to be eliminated. It's an approach that worked for 2 decades, but it was also predicated on Putin retaining his image as a strongman as he acted like he was the only man who could possibly protect Russia. But over 4 years into a brutal war that has cost Russia over 1.3 million casualties. Remember that the FSB has been lying to Putin about the war since it began. Putin has exposed Russia's military as being weaker than anybody thought, which has, in turn, exposed Putin as not being the strongman leader that he always positioned himself to be. Again, this is all part of the plan of organizations like the FSB, and what it means is that the fear narrative inside Russia has been turned on its head. Now, the propagandists that Putin has always relied on to spread fear among the Russian population are delivering the opposite message. They're speaking out against Putin, and in doing so, they're showing that the economical means of creating fear that Putin has used in the past are breaking down. Russia's military bloggers, or Z-bloggers, offer plenty of examples. Long the trumpet bearers for Putin's invasion of Ukraine, these bloggers so often push for the most extreme action to be taken against the country. But as Putin cracks down on platforms like Telegram to limit the reach that the Z-bloggers have, they are turning against him one by one. There are plenty of examples to choose from. On March 18th, the Moscow Times reported that Ilya Remeslo, who has always been one of Russia's most virulent Z-bloggers, has turned against Putin. The Kremlin loyalist broke ranks to publish a Telegram post named 5 Reasons Why I Stopped Supporting Vladimir Putin to his many followers. Among the reasons were that Putin is not a legitimate president and that he has led the Russian people into a dead-end war. The economy is wrecked, Remeslo blared. Living standards are in the gutter, crackdowns on the internet are happening all over Russia, and corruption is flourishing. Vladimir Putin is not a legitimate president. Vladimir Putin must resign and be put on trial as a war criminal and thief, the Z-blogger declared. And he's not the only one to turn his back on Putin and directly oppose the Russian leader in front of a massive online audience. Alexei Chadayev, who heads one of the key development centers for Russia's frontline drones, wrote on Telegram on March 30th that Russians now live in a feudal society. And there are no rights, only privileges, the regular Kremlin apologist wrote. Rybar, who has a Telegram channel with 1 million subscribers, has labeled the Russian spring offensive in Ukraine as a dead end and has decried censorship of the platform he uses to spread his message. This type of open criticism of Putin and the policies that he puts in place was unthinkable a few years ago, when the Z-bloggers were crawling all over themselves to promote the Ukraine invasion. In the political classes, Putin is facing increasing levels of dissent, some subtle and some decidedly less so. One official who spoke on condition of anonymity told the Washington Post in April that the Russian people want an end to Putin's war in Ukraine. The overall mood is that's enough already. You've been fighting for long enough. It seems to everyone that it's been going on for longer than World War II, the Great Patriotic War. And at the same time, we can't even take one region, the official said in a clear takedown of Putin's military policy. Another Russian politician who has evoked the past is Russia's Communist Party leader, Gennady Zhuganov. He used a speech in Russia's State Duma to declare that the economy is on the verge of collapse, and a rebellion like that seen in 1917 awaits Putin. And even people that Putin is appointing to prominent positions, such as Russian Economy Minister Maxim Reshetnikov, are taking subtle jabs. Reshetnikov openly told Russian business leaders in April that there is no more money left in the country's reserves, which ultimately translates to Putin blew it all on a war that he can't win. And then there's Ksenia Sobchak. In a social media post that marked the 4th anniversary of the Ukraine war, Sobchak discussed how Russia's most important cities aren't feeling the pain caused by Putin's war. But that pain is everywhere else in Russia. This is not visible in the capitals. It is not visible in the cities. But it's already woven into countless thousands and thousands and thousands of human destinies. And if we mark on a map every mother who lost a son or daughter, every wife who lost a husband, every family that lost a person killed at the front, the whole country will be burning with red dots of grief and pain, Sobchak wrote. Why does Ksenia Sobchak matter? She's Vladimir Putin's goddaughter. No matter where he looks, Putin sees former allies turning against him. The Z-bloggers who once spread all of the propaganda that Putin could ever spread. The politicians and officials who are rebelling and refusing to toe the party line. Even Putin's own goddaughter is telling Russia's leader that his time is up and the Ukraine war needs to end. Those closest to Putin are gunning for him, and Russia's president has been put into survival mode. He can't end his war. That would mean a certain end to his reign. He also refuses to relinquish his position as president. But the fear is gone, and the criticism is growing. Russia's people are even becoming more confident in using their voices to tell Putin that it is time to go. Polls show us that. In its weekly approval ratings poll, the state-owned Russian Public Opinion Research Center has revealed that Putin's approval ratings have dropped for the 7th straight week to reach 65.6%, the lowest they've been since the Ukraine war began. Another pollster, the Kremlin-aligned Public Opinion Foundation, has also recorded its lowest approval ratings for Putin since February 2022. It says that 73% of its respondents think that Putin is doing a good job. The tide of public opinion is turning along with every other tide we've already discussed. And do you know who is sitting back and rubbing their hands with glee over all of this? The FSB and the other KGB offshoots that now see yet more opportunities to deepen their control, both over Putin and Russia itself. Putin's only answer to all of this is to lean even more into his desperate efforts to crack down on the Russian population. And the FSB is more than happy to keep on playing Putin to get what it wants. As the Z-bloggers, politicians, and people all turn against Russia's leader, intelligence reports coming out of Russia indicate that security is being tightened around Putin amid fears of coups and assassination attempts. That's according to CNN, which reports that security cameras are being placed in the homes of staffers in Putin's inner circle to ward against any danger posed to the president. These sorts of measures have been in place since March 2026, CNN reports. But again, it's all FSB and FSO power plays. They're the ones watching the footage. They're the organizations that control everything that Putin does, everywhere that he goes, and everybody who has access to the Russian president. In his desperate attempts to hold on to power in his final months or years, Putin has handed the reins over to the very people who are gearing up to displace him. So, will Putin be dead before the Ukraine war ends? In terms of the power that he wields in Russia, he already is. Yes, he can stand up, make speeches, and order the FSB to get rid of anybody he thinks is standing in his way. But he's also passing laws and giving more power to a select group of organizations that all know that the only thing they have to do to get even more is to make Putin feel even more fear. The most valuable tool in the Russian president's arsenal is being used against him. Now the only question is who will be the one to end Putin's reign once and for all. Will it be Ukraine and its defense being so strong that Putin dies long before he sees his dream accomplished? Maybe it will be the rising tide of furious Russians who are sick of Putin cracking down on them as he fails to win the war he started. Or perhaps it might be the FSB itself, the true power brokers of Russia, who will get rid of Putin when they have extracted all of the power and control that they can out of Russia's lame duck leader. The one thing we know for sure is that more fuel is being poured onto the fire that is suffocating Putin. Something big is breaking in Russia right now as the country's economy shambles from disaster to catastrophe. The numbers don't lie, and the consequences are very real. And you can find out all about it by checking out our video. Plus, remember to subscribe to the Military Show if you want to see more analysis and examination of the murky underbelly of Russian politics that Putin doesn't want you to see.